Florida State and Clemson are two of the most prominent athletic programs in the Southeast. Yet, supposedly, the Southeastern Conference doesn't want them. Why?
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shout out to the everydayers for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. We're free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this episode, we will talk about the issue that has oddly caused the SEC, Big 10, and Big 12 to stand up for the ACC, why that's happening. We will talk about what I feel like is an inevitability that we're going to start seeing corporate logos and sponsor patches in college football. A lot of you will hate it, but I'll tell you why. We will tell you why it's definitely going to happen. But first, we have to talk about this SEC stuff with Florida State and Clemson. And Kenton, I don't really bring this up in a manner of like trying to troll FSU and Clemson. That's not my intention here, because I do think that they're probably both going to end up in the Big Ten. The question is when. But I was listening to this interview that's been making the rounds. Brett McMurphy from Action Network, who's one of the most plugged-in college football reporters out there. He's a very reliable source for information. He was on the Paul Feinbaum show, and he said about FSU and Clemson, they're going to leave. It's not if, it's when. But then he said as soon as they do reach a settlement and there is a number established for Florida State and Clemson to exit, then that opens the door for other schools to leave. That's why the ACC is fighting this to the bitter end. He says the North Carolina schools, the Virginia schools, he says certainly the SEC would have interest, talking about the North Carolina and Virginia schools, but he says, I don't think they have interest in Florida State or Clemson because they've already got Florida and South Carolina. And honestly, and again, I'm not saying Brett McMurphy is wrong, but that's very odd to me, Kenton, again, because, okay, you can understand maybe the point of view of a lot of the schools within the SEC. It's like, we don't need these other prominent programs to compete with for recruits. Now, Scott Strickland, the Florida athletic director, claims he would be okay with bringing in FSU if it came. I don't believe him, but he did claim that is the case. Maybe if you ask people within the South Carolina program, they might claim they're okay bringing in Clemson. I doubt that. So you can maybe understand why certain members wouldn't want to bring in Florida State and Clemson. But if you look at this from the point of view of the greater good of the SEC and also ESPN's point of view, because they compete directly with the Big Ten with Fox, why would you just kind of throw Florida State and Clemson into the arms of the Big Ten and allow the Big Ten to expand their footprint right into your territory? And that's the southeast of the United States, where the Big Ten currently is not.
So, I'm going to ask you this. Are you a Fairly Odd Parents watcher? Are you a Fairly Odd Parents watcher?
No, heard of it, okay. Never watched it.
I figured as much. Well, I'm gonna help out our younger viewers right now. Do you think that if Mr. Turner, Timmy's dad, was offered the opportunity to spurn Dinkelberg in his moment of greatest despair, you think he'd turn it down? For my older viewers here, you think if the Hatfields had the opportunity to hurt the McCoys in a way that the McCoys had never been hurt before, you think they'd turn that down? These schools right now, I don't think people realize how big of a deal this is. And I'm going to hope, for the sake of FSU and Clemson, because even though they're leaving, I've never been one of those vengeful exes. That's never been me. I've been best of luck to you, baby girl. I hope you get all the best in life. I clearly want the best for you type of guy. And I'm going to say the same thing for these two. If this situation works out that the SEC doesn't want them, watch this dynamic, Donno. There are 4 power conferences, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go down the list, okay? We'll go by alphabetical order. ACC is left, correct?
Yeah.
Then you have the Big Ten, who is a potential suitor for you, correct?
Correct.
And then you have the Big 12, who's set to make less than the ACC, correct?
That is correct.
And then you have the SEC, who will be saying, I don't want your behind, correct?
Correct. Apparently, yeah.
So that leaves you with one potential suitor. I don't know if y'all know how this works or not, but if this is true, which I truly, again, I'm hoping it's not for the sake of FSU and Clemson. If this is true, the Big Ten is going to get them on the sweetest of sweetheart deals because there's nowhere else for them to go. There's nobody who can provide the type of money that they are looking for. And guess what? After you sever the relationship with the ACC, you can't go back to them for the same money. You maybe could go over to the Big 12 for the same money, but congratulations, you just spent tens of millions of dollars in lawyer fees for a lateral move. So you're left going to the Big 10 for whatever scraps they give you above what the Big 12 could offer. If the SEC doesn't want these schools, and again, I really hope they do, because that adds to the bidding war. That adds to getting these schools more revenue, getting them what they want in the end. And maybe one of them goes to SEC, one goes Big Ten, maybe both go SEC, maybe both go Big Ten. I don't know. But at least in that scenario where the SEC is interested, it gives these schools a position of strength. It gives them the ability as a recruiter, when the candidate comes to me and says, hey, Ken, I've got an offer from Microsoft for X amount of money. You've got to jump to match a little bit. You may not have to match it dime for dime, but you got to jump a little bit. We jump to meet it if we think they're that valuable. But if they have nothing on the table, if they don't have a pot to piss in or window to throw it out of in terms of other potential suitors, you're going to take what we're offering you because we're the only ones offering anything.
I just think that the whole thing is odd, right? Because I look at it from the SEC's perspective, and maybe I just have to redefine the ways that I try to understand the business of college football. Because if I look at things in a vacuum, right, where Brett McMurphy says like he thinks the SEC would be interested in Virginia and North Carolina, not interested in Clemson and FSU, like I just look at it as a college football fan and say, like, wouldn't it be the opposite? Like, wouldn't you be more interested in what Clemson and Florida State bring to the table? So I guess there really is a strong notion here that if we already have a presence in state X, Y, or Z, that it's more value to us because, yeah, right now the SEC, they're not in the state of North Carolina. They're not in the state of Virginia. I guess if I take what McMurphy, again, trustworthy reporter, if I take what he says at face value, then I guess everything I know about college football is not necessarily right, because I guess they just feel like having a footprint in certain TV markets is more valuable than having actual programs that theoretically bring more value to the table in a vacuum.
Yeah, and again, I would hate to find out that these schools really are being that petty just to deny their rivals one more time. I would hate to find out that Florida is looking at Florida State like, oh, you want uppies? You want uppies? You want us to come pick you up? You want us to come help you out a little bit? No. Oh, look at you, Clemson. Oh, you need help over there? You all don't want to use the portal and you need a little bit of help making more money? No, it's not happening. If those schools banded together and did not vote to expand for these two, this would be the worst moment in, I believe, either one of these programs' history. And don't get me wrong, there have been some dark things in these universities' histories, and for this to be the worst, yikes. But it really would be, Donno, because you would have spent tens of millions of dollars to not make back those tens of millions of dollars. To have the Big Ten have the power potentially to say, actually, you're going to come in at a reduced rate. And that's just what it is. Because these schools, with all due respect, I don't think that Clemson has the juice and clout to function as an independent. Florida State, possibly. I think it would be extremely difficult.
I think literally the only team that has the clout to do it is the only one that's doing it. I don't know if anyone outside of Notre Dame can do it.
And that's why I said I think it's a possibility. I think it's in the realm of possibility, maybe, if Florida State gets a bunch of strokes of dumb luck all at once. I don't think Clemson is even in that ballpark. And again, for Florida State, it would take a lot of luck to get you there. So at that point in time, you're stuck up the creek without a paddle. And that's not where you want to be.
No, I think that's really, Really well said. Now, just to take, what you were talking about with like, and I brought it up about, Florida and South Carolina, not wanting to bring in Florida State and Clemson, even though the Florida athletic director did say, I don't believe him, but he did say, oh, no, we love our friends in Tallahassee. By the way, Florida fans were mad that he referred to them as his friends, which was a whole nother thing. They were trolling him for that. But even like they would have to form alliances to block it because no one has veto power.
Right.
The way it was explained this week is, if the SEC were to vote on an expansion candidate, it would take more than a simple majority, but 12 out of 16 would have to vote in favor. So, you do the math, it would take more than one or two to block anyone from entering. But I find it fascinating. But yeah.
At that point, you need two more in your alliance because if Florida and South Carolina have banded together and said, we're not voting them in, regardless of what happens, hold the line,
two right there.
Let them starve on the vine. All you need is three more. All you need is three more at that point to veto this thing. And I don't think that that's very hard to do if you're looking at a situation where you're saying, hey, Vanderbilt, you're already about to you're barely in here now.
You're right. That's a good point.
I'm sorry to tell you. Here? You real close to them saying Vanderbilt's got a weird case. Why is he around? You need to protect yourself by not allowing them in. Hey, Texas A&M, with the addition of Texas and Oklahoma, you do realize that we're now in the Texas market, and they just showed they don't care about your brand size. They care about are you or are you not in a place where we already have people, and we've got the biggest brand in Texas coming. I'm just saying, I think about voting them no unless you want to get demoted back down to the Big 12. I don't know. And then, of course, there are a couple other schools that you can swing and sway a certain way. Hey, the Boars down in Alabama, Nick Saban just left. And do you want to go from being the big dogs on the block to potentially having two more schools that could jump you? And one of those schools could potentially not bring enough money in terms of people not wanting to view Clemson if they keep on this downward trajectory because they're anti-portal. I'm just saying. Hear me out, player. Next thing you know, you're cooked. You're cooked off of 4 or 5 basic conversations. I really, really hope this isn't true. I really hope the SEC is interested. And I'm not joking when I say that. I'm not being the slightest bit facetious. I hope so because, again, I hope that these two schools get a good landing spot. I would hate to see the decay of these two programs, in essence, because they made a very poorly calculated move to leave. And I don't think it was a poorly calculated move. I just think that this would be one of the most anarchical moments in college sports history, in all of sports history, honestly.
Yeah, well, it makes me wonder if maybe like the behind the scenes, not tampering negotiations got so advanced with the Big Ten that the SEC just knew they're not coming here. So we might as well say we don't want them. Like, you didn't dump me. You're not ending it. I'm ending it. So maybe something like that happened. But
hopefully,
when we come back, I want to talk about the next step that college football is going to take to becoming even more corporate. I'm okay with it. I'd love to hear Kenton's take. I know a lot of you out there, the traditionalists who are holding on to that last thread of amateurism, are absolutely going to hate this. We're only getting started. You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. Guys, there's a reason why Gametime is the only ticket app that I use. I've been having a blast going to Florida Panthers playoff games in the Stanley Cup with Gametime tickets. My Miami Heat got knocked out early, but I did catch a game courtesy of Gametime. You're getting the best prices, guys. And yeah, if you're going to NBA playoff games, the finals are coming up. Gametime makes getting NBA finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Guys, these priority last-minute deals are awesome. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. You can even get tickets sometimes after the game has already started. Guys, the all-in pricing is a game changer. They show you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much to the Everydayers for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national experts covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Alex Donno alongside Kenton Gibbs. We are Locked On ACC. All right, so Kenton, something that is going to be discussed next week, the NCAA Rules Committee is meeting. And so this story was actually brought up in the SEC meetings that are happening this week, and NCAA rule meetings are happening next week. And it seems like there is full support, if not unanimous support, within the SEC. And I would imagine the other power conferences in making this happen. So they're going to be talking next week about putting corporate logos on football fields, right, on game day Saturdays, and potentially even putting corporate sponsor patches on jerseys. I don't think it'll be like the big ones you see in soccer games. I think it'll be more like the ones you see on NBA jerseys that are up in the top corner. Now, I understand, Kenton, a lot of people are going to hear this and they are going to hate it. They're going to yell and scream. Honestly, the way that I look at it, I embrace this, okay? I embrace it because I know and you know what sort of revenue these major programs are going to have to make up in order to pay that extra settlement money that's going to come with the House versus NCAA settlement, which is just about approved now. And look, I remember a few years ago when they talked about, and they did it, adding the sponsorship patches on NBA jerseys. I remember there was a huge outcry of negativity about that. And then Kenton, the patches have been on these jerseys for like 4 years in the NBA. It's like nobody notices them anymore. It's not a big deal. It's extra revenue these teams are generating. And yeah, a lot of your favorite college football programs are going to need that extra revenue more than these NBA teams do.
Yes, and let me say this, Donno, I know that you were a little too old to catch Fairy Odd Parents as like part of your prime cartoon watching, but I know that Wu-Tang was part of your rotation when you started listening to music heavily. So let's channel our inner Wu-Tang, because cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money, dollar bills, y'all, and that's what this is coming down to. These teams are going to be receiving more money, which they're going to need. They're going to need to balance those budgets in order to pay this $20 million plus, or the estimated, 17 to 22 potentially, to these players. They're going to have to find a way to come up with that money. And if that money comes from having Cheerwine on your jersey, if that money comes from having Turo on your jersey, if that money comes from having Match.com on your jersey, then so the hell what? Okay, somebody said that I was going to have FarmersOnly.com. I cried laughing. But the reality is simple. The reality is simple. I'm telling you, as sure as the sun rises on the east and sets on the west, if I dropped off an extra expense that we already calculated, went from as low as 15% to 33% increase in your bills, you'll be doing whatever you need to make money too. If McDonald's said that your son had to get the Gold Arches tattooed on his left shoulder, you might think about it. Not saying I'm guaranteeing you do it, but you'd consider it. So with that being said, this is a moment where it's not a big deal. This doesn't challenge the integrity of the game. It isn't giving anybody an unfair advantage or disadvantage. It's something that's weird. It's going to be an eyesore for all of 2 minutes. And then after that, who's staring at the 30-yard line anyway? You watch football. You're not watching the 30 saying, that's a pristine 3, that's a pristine 0 right there. I love it. I love it. I love how wide those hash marks are. It's just clean with nothing there. Nobody cares. Nobody cares, and you shouldn't care now. Let these players get paid. Let these universities get paid. It's an inevitability. In the words of Thanos, it is inevitable, okay? It is inevitable. Go ahead and just enjoy it.
Yeah, and it's like, people don't complain as often as they probably should about the fact when you're watching a college football game, every 3 minutes there's a commercial break. Like,
hey, now,
you're cutting to a commercial.
That's the real deal. That's the real deal that I hate.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so here are some figures according to On3 Sports as to actually how much revenue can be generated by these things that we're talking about, which is more than I would have expected, actually. So according to those with knowledge in the space, field logos on the 25-yard line are expected to fetch at least $1 million annually for an SEC program. So probably, a little less for the ACC, a little less than that for the Big 12, but maybe $1 million annually for an SEC program. Jersey patches could be upward of $5 million per season or more. So it's like, if you're talking about needing to bridge or budget an extra, $22 million per season, and you can get a free 5 just for putting, wish.com on the corner of your jerseys, you jump at that opportunity. I'm sorry. I can live with this.
Let me get back to another time that's a little beyond your prime, Donno. In the words of Chingy, give me what you got for a pork chop. If you gonna give me $6 million to put a little patch here and a little something on the field, what? In the words of Lawrence Taylor, on any given Sunday, I get on the tree and shake like a coconut if you need me to for that kind of money. What are we discussing here? This is a non-issue. This is a non. Yeah. If your teams have the opportunity, even if we took both of those down 20%, for the ACC, we pretend that the ACC is 20% less valuable. That then takes you down from $1 million to 800,000. That then takes you down from 5 million to 4 million. You're looking at $4,800,000.
Wow!
Just for a little patch, and something on the 30, and you're gonna sit here and play around and act like, oh, it's so much of an answer. I don't even think fans would be delusional enough for this one. And don't get me wrong, I've been on that weird, wacky thing called Beyonce's internet. I have seen that people hate everything. I get it. Yes. I understand. I understand that there are purists who hate everything and everything needs to stay how it always was. But that's not how it goes, okay? Like Harry Styles and them said, I know it's not the same as it was, but guess what? It's today. And let me quote one more artist before I kick it back to you. Fat Joe said it best, and we need to go by Fat Joe's words. Yesterday's price is not today's price. It's not today. What it costs to run an athletic department, what it costs to fund football teams back when you started watching football, when the wing tee and the flex bone were all the rage, that is not what we're looking at in 2024. So let's be happy that everybody is finding a way to pay these players without getting into private equity and some of these other things that could be potentially deleterious to your universities later on down the line.
Well, coming up next, the issue that has actually caused the SEC, Big 10, and Big 12 to stand with the ACC. This is an odd one, and I think everybody except maybe Florida State fans will be happy to hear about this. You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked on ACC. Okay, so we've talked quite a bit about the ongoing lawsuits, FSU versus the ACC, Clemson versus the ACC, and one of the big issues, and the Attorney General from my home state, Florida, Ashley Moody,
right,
is also suing the ACC
and on the
because she wants the grant of rights to become public record. Not even the grant of rights, the TV deal, I should say, between ESPN and the ACC. She wants that to become public record. And oddly enough, or maybe not so oddly, even though they're not in the ESPN family, the Big 10 with Fox, the SEC, and the Big 12 are actually uniting with the ACC. So this came through court filings on Wednesday of this week in response to a complaint by Florida AG Ashley Moody last month. Moody accused the ACC of breaking Florida's public records law by not providing a copy of the league's TV contracts with ESPN. Those documents are potentially relevant in the ongoing dueling lawsuits between Florida State and the ACC. The ACC, SEC, Big 10, and Big 12 all argued in Leon County Circuit Court records that the documents must remain confidential to protect trade secrets. Now, I just want people to know, I don't know how much this could actually, hurt Florida State's case, because they've already worked out a deal in South Carolina where like they can make the document available like privately to people involved in the court case. Maybe there might be a few things redacted. I don't know, but they're not making it public record. So maybe they can come to an agreement like that in Florida where, the judge can take a look at it. Maybe Florida State's lawyers can take a look at it without making it public record, because honestly, I understand both sides, Kenton. Obviously, I understand from Florida State standpoint, and the AG is protecting state institution there. She's standing up for them.
As she
Why
should.
to help your case, you would want that document to be out there for everyone to see. But I can absolutely understand if you're ESPN, if you're Fox, because Fox doesn't want this precedent to be set, I'm sure. You don't want your broadcast and trade secrets to be out there. And every network has stuff like that. I mean, our network, Locked On, has a proprietary way of the way that they do things that they don't want, people reading that are outside of the company and blabbering about. It's the same way with ESPN and Fox, I'm sure.
Yeah, and that's my thing is this. Me and you are on lockstep in this one because I get both sides of it. However, to me, it shouldn't be a matter of public court, public opinion deal. It should be, we are all in this lawsuit. We know exactly what's going on. We have deep detail of what's going on. And of course, when everybody in the lawsuit knows, how they say the moon landing couldn't be fake because the amount of people who would need to keep that secret is too high. We all know if you make those documents privately available in that courtroom, there will be a leak. Somebody, somewhere in the process, I can't tell you how much the number is, but if you believe that there's a $30 million range, I'm pointing upwards for those of you who are listening and not watching on YouTube, you may be wrong. If you believe that the grant of rights holds teams in for 12 years regardless, you may be correct. You may be wrong. I can't tell you what. I'm just nodding my head for no reason at all right now, but teams are stuck for 12 years. You see what I'm saying? Like, those things tend to happen a lot when stuff gets released, even amongst small groups. So I don't think that this needs to be public. And I will say, I understand the push to get it public because many of the public who don't understand contracts, when they see it, I'm sure would jump on the bandwagon instantly of like, oh, these teams are being exploited. At least for Florida State and Clemson. I'm sure folks would say, wait a minute, they're getting how much for their viewership as opposed to how much a Vanderbilt, an Indiana, a Minnesota, Wisconsin, a Nebraska is getting for maybe not the same type of viewership.
Yeah, no, it's well said. So here's what the ESPN, what the ACC said about this. They said that the ESPN contracts have other trade secrets too. Everything from how football broadcasts are selected to operational costs, sponsorship information, signage, future payouts, and quote unquote conference composition provisions. So yeah, you have to wonder. You got it's not just the Florida AG versus the ACC now. It's the Florida AG versus the entire Power Four. So we'll see how that one plays out. But always a good time when Kenton Gibbs and I can get together. Guys, you want to make sure you follow Kenton at TGIF_Kenton on X. Check out his other awesome show, Locked On Wolfpack. You can check out my other show. I host Locked On Canes. Follow me on X at Alex Donno. And we will talk to everyone again next time on another episode of Locked On ACC, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.